Eliza Bournay, an associate editor of BookPage, and I am here at ALA in New Orleans talking to Brian Selznick, who won the Caldecott Medal for the gorgeously written and illustrated The Invention of Hugo Cabret. And he has a new book coming out called Wonderstruck, which tells two parallel stories, also through words and pictures. So I am very excited to know. So thanks, Brian.
My pleasure.
So first, could you just tell me what the two different stories in the book are and how they relate?
Sure. The one story that's told all with pictures takes place in 1927, and it's about a girl named Rose who runs away to New York City following an actress who she is obsessed with. And the other story takes place all with words, and it's in 1977, and it's about a boy named Ben who comes to New York looking for a father who he never knew. So these two stories, which are 50 years apart, weave back and forth until they come together at the end. And so the story that's told all with pictures is for a character who we find out during the course of the story is deaf. And one of the things I found out in my research is that a lot of early deaf educators talked about how deaf people are people of the eye, that really most of the way they communicate is through what deaf people can see. So sign language is visual, you watch it, and so I thought that would be an interesting way to illustrate a book, by illustrating a story from the point of view of the character, showing you what the character sees and how she understands the world around her.
So, what is your process like? Are you doing one story all the way through and then another story? Are you going back and forth?
I develop both of the stories at the same time. So even though one story is all with pictures, and I knew that from the beginning, I started by writing everything. So I began with a notebook. I think I might have even written a line down the middle of the notebook, and on one side written Rose's story, and on the other side written Ben's story, or the years 1927, 1977. And there's a kid who's in Gunflint Lake, Minnesota, and he, and I just started working out the plot. And then there's a girl who, lives in New Jersey, and she is doing this and loves this. And then as I was working on each of the stories, they would inform each other. So because I knew that the story with words was not going to be illustrated, if there was something in the boy's story in words that I wanted to draw really badly, I had to figure out a way to draw a similar thing in the 1927 story, so that would change what was happening in the story. So in 1977, the boy is in a terrible lightning storm, and I really wanted to draw lightning, but I couldn't draw anything for the word story because it's all with words. So for the picture story, I came up with this idea to have the girl go to a movie theater to see a movie where on screen we see a lightning storm. And then I had to figure out, though, why did the girl go see the movies? So I decided that she was obsessed with this movie actress named Lillian Mayhew, and then that became the most important part of her story, but that developed because I wanted to draw lightning.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, this book is kind of about two separate quests of these kids, and I wondered, when you were a child, if you ever wanted to run away from home, or if you ever had something that you were chasing after.
I think probably all kids at some point want to run away from home, or at least run away from something. I also really love Houdini, and I think the idea that Houdini could escape from anything that he's locked inside of is definitely a related idea to having a quest that you want to go on. And I had a pretty happy childhood. My parents were nice, and I have a sister and a brother who I got along pretty well with, and I loved to draw. But I was lonely sometimes, and sometimes my drawing was the thing that I escaped into. And I remember my sister actually ran away, but she only made it to the top of the block. But I never actually thought about running away. But when it was time to write the story, everything sort of becomes symbolic and metaphorical, when you're writing a story. And so the symbolism of someone wanting to run away from the situation that they're in was very meaningful to me, even though I never actually ran away.
Well, what was it like to follow up Hugo Cabret, which, as I already said, was hugely successful and kind of pioneered this new type of book, let alone winning the Caldecott. Now it's being made into a movie by Martin Scorsese. It's about to come out.
Yeah.
And did you feel anxiety or stress, or were you just excited to move on to a new project?
When I'm working, the success or failure of any previous projects don't necessarily weigh heavily on what the work is. So I had this huge success with Hugo that I was completely not expecting. I had an amazing year traveling and talking and having all these incredible things happen with the book, and I couldn't have had more fun with everything that happened and been more proud, and it was amazing. But when it was time for me to sit down and start working on my next book, the only thing that I had was the blank piece of paper and my pen and the computer that I was typing at, and all of the success, even though I was aware of it, it was still here in my life. That doesn't help me make another book. So when I was making Hugo, I spent 2.5 years. I didn't know if anybody would read it. It's a weird book about French silent movies for kids, like not a guaranteed bestseller. But I made it because I loved it. I loved the story. I was fascinated by the structure I was coming up with. And so I made the book. And so all the success happened, but then when it was time to sit down and make another book, I was right back where I was at the beginning with Hugo, where I was writing about things I really loved, but I didn't know if anybody would read it. I didn't know if anybody would like it, but I loved what I was working on, and so I just worked really hard to make it the best book that I could, and just hope that the people who liked Hugo will at least come to Wonderstruck and hopefully enjoy what it is, because it's a cousin to Hugo in that it also has words and pictures, and if you were to flip through it, it would look like the same kind of book, but the reading experience, because it's actually two different stories, is a very, very different thing. And so I just hope that everybody likes Wonderstruck as well.
I'm excited about it. It is a beautiful book.
Oh, thank you.
Well, finally, since we are here at ALA, which is all about libraries and librarians,
Yeah.
hoping you could tell me a library memory that you have, a favorite librarian, a favorite time spent at the library, basically why libraries are important to you and have been in your life.
Yeah, I just got the chance to go back to my elementary school, Wonderstruck, in East Brunswick, New Jersey, and I hadn't been back in a very long time. And it was almost exactly the same. Like the decorations, the rooms were all the same. And one of the only rooms that was different was the library. They had made a larger library in a new wing on the back. But walking by that hallway and seeing in those windows, like I could still see in my mind, looking through those windows, Mrs. Dickerman in her rocking chair as we went in first, second, third grade and sat on the floor and had her read books to us. And that was one of the most important, meaningful memories that I had. She was an amazing librarian. It was always a place that you could go, and she always had the right book. And going to the East Brunswick Public Library, which is still thriving in East Brunswick, New Jersey, and doing my research there for my first book, The Houdini Box. The libraries have always been a very, very important part of the work that I do.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me and to BookPage readers, Brian, and we will look out for Wonderstruck.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.